We're on. Fact check me.
Got to keep those journalists honest.
I'm not a journalist. I'm an entertainer. Rob Hamilton, how you doing, man?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. How is AnchorWatch?
We're doing great. A lot of work. I guess I'll keep it to this. There's kind of like two branches into the business. I wasn't even expecting to talk about AnchorWatch today.
Should we save it for the end? Should we do the interesting shit?
I think it's all interesting.
Should we bore people first?
I'll keep it at a very high level. So AnchorWatch is...
I'm only teasing you because Danny said, you're not talking to Rob about technical stuff today.
Danny gave me strict instructions, no technical anything. This is a think boy, like macro heady podcast.
Do you know what? I've been doing my XPub research, my Miniscript research.
Oh, no
I was ready to go. I was going to talk about derivation paths. Is that what they're called?
They are.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. No, ultimately, just I'll since you kicked off with that, we're doing regulated Bitcoin insurance. The ultimate base premise here is that the way all Bitcoin, and this actually ties into the larger conversation, is that the way Bitcoin is structured today, you at any large scale, you're ultimately, if you're an institution, you're pushing your money over into a custodian. Structurally, it's interesting because if you look at Coinbase's most recent quarterly filing, they have a line item, $320 billion of safeguarding other customers' crypto. To my knowledge, they have a $420 million crime policy. So you start doing the math really quick.
Crime policy. Is that insurance?
It's an insurance policy, yeah.
Yeah, specifically, it's like 12 cents on the dollar or something, isn't it?
It's fractions of a penny on the dollar.
Oh.
And so with it being structurally, it's specifically a crime policy because what it covers is if the employees at Coinbase were to collude and commit a crime or some sort of high-level crime were to happen and the money's lost. So other kinds of loss aren't covered. And additionally, you're talking fractions of a fraction of a penny. The way I view this structurally is that the way the ecosystem started, Bitcoin was always about self-custody. And all of the security practices were because you were doing this thing called self-insuring, right? Your keys, your risk. If you mess up, the money's gone, there's no refunds. It's kind of a fundamental premise of Bitcoin is there are no refunds, right? And that's why we got like hardware wallets and seed phrases and backups. Like all of this stuff was because the data is the money and you can't lose that. And there's no way you can get it back if you lose it. So custodians kind of charge what would be called in tech like a SaaS fee. So they charge based on the amount of money you're depositing. Yep. But your coverage is not really tied to that, right? So if you have, with one $420 million policy, if they lose more than that, you're already not being covered. And what we're trying to do at AnchorWatch is kind of flip that on its head and say, if you're paying someone to safeguard your Bitcoin, you should be indemnified if something goes wrong. Because otherwise, if you're a company and you're providing a SaaS fee, what the company gets to do is they get to recognize that all is just profit, right? And if something were to go wrong, maybe you have an insurance policy, maybe you don't. But then ultimately, if something goes wrong, you're not stuck with anything. So from a consumer protection standpoint, it's from saying, hey, if you're going to pay someone to manage this for you, you should know that it's going to be there. You've already accepted the risk of the price volatility of Bitcoin if you have Bitcoin. The last thing you want to have is a key man risk. And you look at something like FTX. Did you hear they got 100% payout back?
Oh, it's 100% now?
Denominated in dollars.
So
Bitcoin, so it was at 16K.
It's not 100%.
Well, that's the cheeky way of framing it, right? But this is the thing is that if you have a certain amount of Bitcoin, you should have that kind of guarantee against it. And so what we're doing is your Bitcoin, your name is on an insurance policy, your UTXO, your Bitcoin is tied to it. So there's no kind of departure in the risk calculus. And for this kind I know you kicked off a little bit about the tech side. The way we approach this is different. You mentioned Miniscript. We're basically tying the Bitcoin to be more robust. 2 of 3 multisig and how most people custody their Bitcoin today came around in 2011. In 2014 was pay to script hash, but like it really hasn't meaningfully innovated since then. What Miniscript does, it allows you to do more advanced Bitcoin native smart contracts for more advanced custody. And what we're doing with that is being able to elevate the standard of the technology underlying the custody infrastructure and then anchoring that to an actual insurance contract and having those two be linked together. And the really interesting, just at a high level, is if your insurance policy, let's say, expires on January 1st, we can have it so on January 7th, the money is released and you are the only one who's able to move that money afterwards. We don't have a contract anymore. It's your money. You should be able to move it whenever you want, which is a different paradigm than calling up a custodian or a vendor and saying, hey, I'd like my money back, please. You're hoping that they can return it to you like everyone at FTX, right? So There's like
how
a whole
give me this, talk me through the scenario that I use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we built a wallet called Trident, kind of like a multi-pronged security, keeping on with the nautical theming. And the idea is that you would first sign up. It would be going through insurance underwriting. It's an insurance application, just getting some background information on you, right? Assessing your risk. If you're all approved and good to go, we set you up with a vault. You can use a ledger. The ledger kind of signs off on the smart contract. And for an organization, let's take like Real Bedford, right? You could have yourself, Danny, and maybe Emily, right? Like a third person, like each holding a key. The way the vault works is that it's your 2 of 3, whoever they are, plus our 2 of 3 for the length of the insurance contract. So this is not a 4 of 6. It's your 2 of 3 and our 2 of 3, which allows us to mitigate and kind of
hold on.
Yeah.
Walk me through that. So is it a 2 of 2 with two of 3s?
That's a way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So that's at the start of the policy.
Yeah. So hold on.
Yeah.
So
I'm excited. I wasn't expecting to talk tech today.
no, fuck. Sorry, Danny. So
I tried.
if you lose 2 of your keys, the 2 of 2 doesn't work. And if I lose 2 of my keys, my 2 of 2 to my 2 of 3 doesn't work.
So let's talk about that's at the start. So this is the interesting thing. Leveraging Bitcoin as programmable money, and my comment about 2 of 3 multisig has been around since 2011. In the modern sense, 2014. You can have a Bitcoin address that has more than one way you can spend money from it. This is an interesting concept where if you think Bitcoin like a programming language, you can do like if else. So if this or that, right? And you can nest all these different spending conditions. Now, by default, it's 2 of 3 and 2 of 3. Now, if we were to get to a position where, let's say you lost 2 of your keys, 6 months into the policy, you only need 1 of your 3 keys. And this is an interesting concept because you're now able to have many ways that your money can survive if something goes wrong. Rather than distributing risk in a 2 of 3 and changing who the key holders are, you're changing the rules in which the money can actually be spent. And that is a really compelling way to do risk distribution. Mm-hmm. And so to your point about like, if I lose 2 keys, if I lose 2 keys, if for whatever reason we manage to misexecute, lose keys, you have an insurance policy denominated in US dollars today.
If you fuck up.
If we fuck up.
But I'm not insured if I fuck up.
You are insured if you fucked up. So we can walk through the rest of this. Let's say you lost all of your keys. Mm-hmm. All of your keys are, you had a massive, tragic accident. All of the keys are destroyed. We can actually have, in the last month of the policy, before we lose liability, we can actually work with a recovery partner and indemnify and return the coins to you.
How do you recover?
So we can think of it like layers of a cake, right? So layer 1 is the customer 2 of 3 and the AnchorWatch 2 of 3. Yep. The next layer, 6 months in, is 1 of 3 and 2 of the 3 AnchorWatch keys, right? Mm-hmm. The third layer is now AnchorWatch, 2 of 3 keys, plus a recovery partner who's not you. And we are heavily incentivized to recover the money for you because if we're not able to, we're going to have to pay out the insurance claim, right? So we are very heavily aligned to make sure. And this is kind of like skin in the game risk alignment.
What stops you colluding with the recovery partner to steal the coins?
In a technical sense, nothing could stop us from doing that, right? But you have an insurance policy for you as the end customer. That would be disastrous for me, my reputation, my business. But the insurance policy is the key kind of flip here, is where it's not just like a software contract for a custody contract. It's actually indemnifying you at the end of the day. And then when the contract's expired, we're not business partners anymore. You can just take your 2 of 3 and you can just withdraw the money and do whatever the heck you want.
So the insurance contract is driving the design of the key setup.
I would say what's really interesting is they inform each other.
Yeah,
they work with each other, right? What the insurance contract brings is we had to be able to provide a certain level of certainty of what happens if a customer has a tragic, like just mismanagement of keys. We can still be able to recover the assets, right? And then additionally, it's also from like me as running a business, I can have 10 customers. And if you have a catastrophic loss, my other 9 customers aren't impacted. Compare that to anyone who's using a custodian, or if you're using the same 2 or 3 players, everyone's keys are using the same stack, right? And so if they all lose, you either have some fractional amount of insurance, or what's really important, you'll have an insurance coverage which actually doesn't cover the loss of the keys. You'll have phishing insurance, where if someone were to log into your account and request a withdrawal and move the money, that may be covered. But if the keys get destroyed, or if there's an internal crime like collusion, like you're saying, it wouldn't be covered. So it's not just the amount of coverage, but it's the type of coverage. And what we've done, which I'm pretty proud of and is innovative between myself and my co-founder Becca and the whole team has been working. Big up, Becca. Yeah, big shout out for Becca. We've worked really hard on this dual approach of being able to have not just the advancing of the Bitcoin custody technology, but also bringing regulated premium insurance to be able to underwrite the whole thing.
Okay.
All right.
So when are you live?
Hoping to be live in about 90 days. Okay. There's a lot of the tech all works. I'll show you a demo later. I got mainnet transactions. It all works. It's all great. Just getting through the final regulatory compliance side on the insurance piece to be able to fully stand it up, but we're really excited.
And the insurance company, reinsurance, they're all okay?
Very good.
Damn, man. You've done something that nobody else has been able to do.
Well, it's interesting. And this kind of actually, I'll save the audience now. You can kind of tune back in now. We're leaving the tech conversation. This is my thesis around Bitcoin as it intersects with traditional finance. Like, take a moment. This week, we're about to kick off. It's Monday before the Bitcoin conference. This is going to be the biggest conference this industry has ever seen.
It's nuts.
The Bitcoin magazine, David Bailey, the whole team has been crushing for months to try and build this, and it's turning into a real festival, just celebrating Bitcoin.
It's going to be nuts.
It's going to be. I know, like you and I are giddy thinking about this, but I want to like.
It's the. I don't want to be Donald Rumsfeld here, but it's the unknown unknowns.
Of course. Always.
I know my known knowns. I've seen who the speakers are.
Yeah.
And my known unknowns, there's going to be some speakers I'm not aware of, some surprise guests. And my unknown knowns, there's going to be some crazy shit that happens on stage. Maybe like someone storms the stage. It's the unknown unknowns.
Of course.
Like what is coming that I haven't even thought about that I'm going to go, fucking hell.
It's an exciting time. And I agree. I've heard the rumors flying around of potential speakers and like people who last minute may get added. And I'll just say like, I wanted to this is an interesting time to have the conversation just because reflect and be like, Pete, you've been in Bitcoin since 2017 when you really picked it up hard, but you were around
13,
for a while.
13 really.
Yeah.
I don't have any Bitcoin from 13 left over.
Sure.
So like, I always say like, I think your starting point in some ways counts from your oldest Bitcoin.
Okay.
And my oldest Bitcoin is like 2017.
Yeah. So I'm a 2013 Bitcoiner by that definition then. And like working for 10 plus years, like not working in this industry full time, but like having Bitcoin being a large cornerstone of my life, I can't help but feel this is somewhat of an inflection point in how things are going to change going forward. Like the amount of attention that Bitcoin's getting in the larger political sphere, in the whole just technical narratives of just kind of like the country. It's a very interesting time. And it's a real open question now of the ETFs launched, this year. We're getting to a point now where this financialization of Bitcoin, things that, the guys at the Nakamoto Institute, Pierre and Michael, right? Been like speculative attacks, financialization of Bitcoin. It's all happening. It's all happening. And it's almost like there's a great line from the series finale of The Office where the guy says, I wish I knew there was a time to know like when the good old days were happening when you're in them. And I feel like we're kind of like a little bit of like a sun setting on a certain, like the good old days of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's weird because 2013, my vague memories of it was Silk Road and trading CFDs, right? And I lost some Bitcoin on the Silk Road. What's his name? Tim Thingy has them now. Tim Draper has those.
Tim Draper,
now. Yeah. Motherfucker, give me my Bitcoin back to him. And like trading CFDs and I was making money and then losing money and then whatever. And then ignored it for a while. And then 2017 onwards, it's been like, I've made 900 fucking podcasts, mate.
Yeah.
And it's grown and it's grown and it's grown. But like all these, I would say for a long time, I was like, yeah, but it's not really going to work out. Like this, when people talk about hyper-Bitcoinization, I'm like, it's not a real thing. That's not going to actually happen. The government's going to stop this. Like, but it's happening. And we get to live through it at the front of it.
Yeah. So I went on your podcast 2 times ago. I was talking about like hyper-Bitcoinization. It's almost like wish fulfillment for Bitcoiners. Whatever you want is hyper-Bitcoinization, right? It's like kind of like, it's this hard thing to define, but I think we can all look at the ETF adoption. It's kind of uptake in the political cycle and be like, this is part of Bitcoin growing up and getting larger adoption. And I think it's an open question of, in this world of traditional finance, Bitcoin was birthed out of the 2008 financial crisis. And I've been putting thought going into this podcast of like, what defines Bitcoin? You could say 21 million, like proof of work, right? No reversing transactions, like all of these things. But if you were to distill it into a simpler thing, it's just no bailouts. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately what it is. Is no bailouts.
Hold on, you're building a bailout business.
Well, no, so risk transference is different than a bailout because you're talking systemic.
I know you.
There's a difference between a systemic level bailout and an individual peer-to-peer financial contract for indemnification for something. Right.
Yeah, no, I know.
Right. I know. You're being cheeky. But this isn't a question of just financial services in general. Like financial services will exist. People want to be able to borrow and lend and do things with their Bitcoin. And I think it's an open question of like, what elements of Bitcoin culture are going to get subsumed into traditional finance and what's going to go the other way and become what we think as Bitcoin culture is going to become more traditional. Like TradFi is going to intersect, right? And I think it's going to be ultimately some kind of middling ground between the two. But the way the tech is being adopted and used are open questions for, I think ultimately, like the common critique is like an ETF Bitcoin's not your Bitcoin, right? They have real Bitcoin. It's sitting there like at a custodian. It's being managed. Are we ever going to get to a point where there's going to be a Bitcoin bailout? I'm imagining no, because this is an interesting thing. Wealth concentration from the traditional finance system, or like your old money wealthy elite. And then you have this like nouveau rich Bitcoin, a bunch of crazy people like you and I.
Bitcoin bourgeoisie.
Yeah. And it's almost like a meeting of the two in the middle. And what I think helps strengthen the system is a lot of those old Bitcoin money, they're not putting their money anywhere into the financial system. And since they hold a lot of coins, they hold a lot of economic power. Bitcoin ultimately is an economic network. And the amount of coins you have kind of talk about your influence in the event there's a disagreement. So day to day, having a lot of coins doesn't do anything. But if you look back on things like, I start thinking through the lens of like if Bitcoin and like attacks and culture, like attack services is forking. If there's some sort of change in the code and people disagree, you're going to have like power cohorts on each side that are trying to mitigate that.
Yeah, and 2017, Adam Back was my flag.
Yeah.
Jameson Lopp was my flag.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't know if big blocks or small blocks are better. I mean, I get both arguments. Yeah, small blocks are the better for decentralization, but big blocks, we need to get more data. Like both, I mean, I was green. It both made sense. But I was like, this Adam Back guy, I trust him.
Mm-hmm.
This Jameson Lopp, I trust him. Not so sure on this G. Hamwood fella. I'm not sure. This Roger Ver cat, I'm not sure on him. But the truth is, this cycle around, people are going to look at Sailor.
People are going to look at you.
Well, I'm going to be like, do you know what an XPub is?
Well, no, but it's not even about the technical stuff. But you've been openly having conversations now for 900 episodes.
Yeah.
A lot of people got into Bitcoin. I've linked a lot of people. You're like getting into Bitcoin podcast series to like get them started up. You're going to be seen as one of these. It's almost like an oracle of like. I know you're kind of scared of the thought of people. I know, but seriously, like it's.
I'll be like, Adam, just go with Adam.
These are all going to be thinking about the increased size role, the increased adoption. Like the space was so much smaller in 2017. It was easy to point out a Jameson Lopp or an Adam Back, right? And I think like in the larger have you ever heard of the concept of eternal September?
Yes. Came up in my last interview with CK.
Oh, did it? Oh, I love CK. Yeah. For those who didn't listen, you should go listen to CK. But Eternal September was this whole phenomenon in the early 90s in college dorms where the internet was usually only accessible on college dorms and like college campuses. And then eventually the internet and every September they'd have to re-educate all the freshmen on like internet etiquette and like how to use the internet. And then what happened one day was that you didn't have to be in college anymore to have access to the internet. And that's called Eternal September.
So, you know, it's interesting. I've never had the backstory. I know the meaning, but I never had the backstory. Interesting.
Yeah. So it comes from like US campus culture and just like when that was usually where you had to go to the internet to be able to use it, right? And so Bitcoin's going through its own Eternal September now because how many people are just passively allocating into a Bitcoin ETF?
Yeah. What's Eternal September? Is it every single retailer you go in that Bitcoin is accepted as much as Visa?
I don't even think it has to be from the payment. Like, just like, look, if every single financial advisor and like RIA is pushing Bitcoin allocation, like they're putting dollars into the Bitcoin network via a proxy, but they're still doing it. I view that as, you know, I mean, it becomes ambiguous when everyone has, you know, a % of their net worth in Bitcoin. They don't have to be spending it every day because just like they don't go and spend their NVIDIA stock. right? Like they just, but it's a meaningful, like they look at it.
But it will be Saylor. He'll be one. People are, what is Saylor saying?
Absolutely. Yes.
And it is now, to be honest, it is now. That last interview I did with him, that shifted some people's thoughts.
Yeah.
It will be Dorsey.
Yes.
It will be Gladstein. It's a new way. It may be a little bit less Adam Back. For me, it's still Adam Back. And for me, it's still Jameson Lopp. It's still those people, I think, at a technical level. But it's a soup of opinions as well.
Yeah, that's the growing of the tent, right?
Yeah.
So you can almost view Bitcoin in a loose sense like a political coalition, as you're just trying to build a big tent. So you have your hardcore peer-to-peer cypherpunks, no KYC, like they do Bitcoin in the shadows, right? Like they're just kind of very like stealthy, and they have very strong anarchic principles. And on the other end, you have Saylor, who's the CEO of a publicly traded company, who's managing 1% of the Bitcoin in circulation. They're all in the tent of Bitcoin. And this has been something over the past year culturally, with people doing inscriptions or whatever that stuff was. Like they're using Bitcoin, and actually, to their credit, they're all self-custodying it, and they're using it in a peer-to-peer fashion. They may not be putting on a nice suit and walking into an investment firm, but they're all users of the Bitcoin network, right? And this is where like Bitcoin is a big tent, understanding how these like coalitions of people organize themselves and how Bitcoin kind of continues to develop.
Well, look, it's a pure maturing of the market.
Yeah.
Your insurance product is a maturing of the market.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, look, you say hyper-Bitcoinization can mean a number of things for me. One of the important flags for me is that we're not a niche anymore. It's not Bitcoin conferences, and there's no more Bitcoin podcasts. And like, it's just everything. It's just bled into the mainstream culture. It's like Shift's Gold podcast is a bit weird.
Yeah.
But why the fuck would you listen to that? You want to listen to an investing podcast, or you want to listen to a technology podcast. But I think ultimately all of these niches die because we need, it needed to be a niche to grow. We needed to work together. It needed community. It needed coalitions. But eventually it shouldn't.
The dying of the niche is hyper-Bitcoinization.
There you go.
Absolutely. Like, I totally agree with that, right? And so there's been interesting, like I mentioned the ETFs earlier. This is something I've been thinking about. The ETFs in the United States are cash settled. And what that ultimately means is that you have a certain dollar amount that ties to a certain amount of Bitcoin. When you go to sell, they sell the Bitcoin and they give you the dollars. You can't withdraw the Bitcoin.
We don't like to do it.
Well, think about this for a moment, right? And the continued financialization of Bitcoin on a TradFi and Bitcoin kind of like spectrum here. If you get native spot settlement, where you can actually deposit Bitcoin and get shares of an ETF, there's a really interesting mechanic that starts to unlock. And that's you're able to get margin. I could deposit $1 million of Bitcoin, get $1 million of shares, and I can go margin that, and I can get, let's just say, like $600,000 in cash with like a 3% interest loan, right? This is the buy, borrow, die strategy. Like very well, like Jeff Bezos doesn't typically sell his Amazon shares. He pledges his Amazon shares as collateral, and he gets a loan. He pays the interest on the loan. He doesn't have to pay taxes on it because he never sold it, right? And you compare that to the way Bitcoin native like lending works today, the interest rates are like double digits. But once you get into the financialization scale of TradFi, that becomes a really interesting honeypot for people to start plowing, Bitcoin into the traditional financial system.
They're interesting though. I know there are people who've taken out Bitcoin loans. They've pledged collateral against it. They've never paid the loan off and never will.
Yep.
And they don't actually need to.
Buy, borrow, die.
Yeah, because the collateral just sits there covering it. I mean, look, they've got counterparty risk, but that's their risk.
Yeah.
And that's the only risk. And if Bitcoin can, like if you have your LTV at the right rate, if Bitcoin grows forever, you've got an eternal cash pot.
Yeah. You can actually just renew the loan and just get more out of it, right?
Yeah.
You can just top it up. Like if you opened up a loan at 25K and now it's at 65K and maybe it gets to 100K, you can just retop it off and get a whole new tranche of cash coming in there.
Or you can just take some of the Bitcoin back.
You could.
Yeah.
Either way.
It's weird though, right? You can kind of get free money.
The cost of the interest is kind of like the opportunity cost you have to pay for it. And my point is that it's free in the sense that you don't have to sell. You have to pay a maintenance cost to maintain the loan. But as that interest rate comes down, as Bitcoin gets more subsumed into the traditional finance system, it's going to make it even easier to make that trade.
But do you think ultimately it adds to the killing of the dollar off? Or do you think it strengthens it?
So this is another interesting leg. So I think
I don't fucking know.
No, this is great. So like if you're thinking about it like from crypto as an industry, like the one thing that's very obviously TradFi, there's nothing cypherpunk about a stable coin, right? A stable coin, but it has massive utility and use, right? A lot of people use it. A lot of people get value out of using it, whether it's peer-to-peer payments, like when you're in Argentina, or if you're just going random like DeFi crazy, like gambling and speculation, right? That is something that is very much on the spectrum of like Bitcoin and TradFi. That's very much a TradFi product. It's just using cryptocurrency rails to execute it. And then mechanically, you have a bunch of people that get dollars to get the stable coin, and then someone collects interest on that, right? Like it becomes, it's a furtherance. If you're like on the anarcho-capitalist, like small government side, you're saying, well, buying stable coins is funding the US government, right? So that's very much a TradFi booster in kind of like the multiple coalitions and power struggles. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, because the conversation I was having with CK is that he thinks we're incredibly early.
Yes.
Like he thinks we're a long way from crossing the chasm. He thinks, we could be decades away.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think we're closer than that. And so the interesting thing is like, it feels like retail had a head start. But really, because of the ETS, yes, it's still retail, people using it, but it's an institutional product. It's like institutions are now piling in. And I feel like I was even talking to Danny about it. I was like, I've got a feeling we might not have a huge retail market, this bull market, via people buying spot Bitcoin on exchanges. I've got this gunning stick feel that it's going to be driven by the ETFs.
I mean, let's look at this mechanically. Look like your father, right? Or just a random person who's not in Bitcoin. Are you going to convince them to wire money to a new website, buy Bitcoin through an interface, and then have to take settlement of that Bitcoin out of the system? Most people don't do that.
Get a cold card.
Get a cold card, roll some dice, wrap yourself in tinfoil, and like go into a bunker and like use your coin. What's important about Bitcoin as a system is that is an option to do. You have the optionality at any point to kind of take your money out of whatever custodian you're using. That's the strength of it, at least, right? I think it's much easier just for someone to go to their Fidelity or Schwab account and just buy some shares of a stock. That's how most Americans and most wealth in the world is managed.
That's a lot of risk, though, if too much of Bitcoin is bought through the ETFs.
Yeah. And this goes
Do you worry about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So like I think about this mechanically in that you need to make sure that everyone has their right to exit, but there's so much incentivization for locking your Bitcoin and keeping them in these shares. Like if you bought Grayscale shares and now it's an ETF, you have to take a capital gains hit if you sell that because it's cash settled. Yeah. Right. So there's certain mechanics that almost become like a roach motel, like Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave kind of stuff. Right. And I think, you're looking at Bitcoin, if you have multiple power brokers and players that start aggregating a lot of the coin volume, it can become a threat if it's not paid attention to, and people get, I would say, complacent. Like you have to be, people still need to be running nodes, checking the code, making sure that the peer-to-peer layer still works and operates functionally. And that acts as a check to make sure that you can't bring in traditional finance systems like a bailout back into Bitcoin. You don't want, it's a concern. I'm ultimately optimistic. I think Bitcoin wins. Like Bitcoin culture, no bailouts being the big thing. But it's definitely something I think about. I think about designing and understanding how to structure it. It's how I kind of put thought into structuring my product in a way where even if I were to go disappear off into the Cayman Islands, at the end of the insurance contract, you can unilaterally pull the money out, right?
Have you listened to my show with Whitney Webb and Mark Goodwin?
I did, both part 1 and part 2 this morning, actually.
Okay.
I was told to check them out. It was really good content have you listened to the Bitcoin Bugle journals?
No, but they're
Rod Palmer and Richard Greaser, they do great content.
They're the Twitter guys who like.
Oh, they're hilarious.
Fucking hilarious.
Yeah, they're very good.
Hold on, didn't I win?
You won. Oh, we haven't talked about that. The Compliance Pride Month poll.
I'm very proud of myself. I haven't won a lot in life.
Rebecca from Compliance at AnchorWatch is very upset that she's been putting the proof of work of compliance in there, and you kind of came in and just bullied us with your platform.
All I did was retweet everything once.
I know.
Right, one retweet. I think did I beat Sailor in one?
Yeah, you
with a retweet.
I think you won it.
Yeah, no, I did. Every round, like I won the first couple, and then I
folded in the final.
Yes, Fold in the final.
And Sailor in the semis.
In fairness, Fold should have won.
Yeah, Brian Harrington was putting in the work over there, just like grinding away, trying to get those likes and will.
Retweet, vote for me, Bosch won.
Check out, see you later. I forgot what we were saying, but yeah, that was, you did win the compliance poll.
Bugle News told you about
The Whitney Webb.
Yeah.
So I listened to part 1 and 2 this morning, and I also listened to, they also went on TFTC with Marty and talked about more of it too, especially because this was post JD Vance pick, right?
Yeah. So look, the truth of this is that I think there's some people who are so distrusting of the system when you have, and this is no disrespect to Whitney and Mark, but they're connecting dots a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I think when you can connect dots, you can connect correctly, but sometimes you may get some things wrong and yada, yada. And so I think there's certain people who will listen to a podcast like that and say, I believe everything they said, therefore everything's true, therefore fuck the traditional system. There's other people, because I see the comments that go, oh, this is crazy talk, these people are crazy. And so it's like, I'm always like, where's the truth here? Where's the truth here? But when they connect the dots for a Bitcoin dollar system, it kind of makes sense. And then you start to think, well, okay, so if you wanted to capture a bunch of Bitcoin to maintain a Bitcoin dollar system, the ETFs are great. We've got these big honeypots, these big pools of Bitcoin. But then I'm like, well, everything's good for Bitcoin. And so like, if they need Bitcoin to maintain the dollar hegemony, then they can't fuck it up either.
No. So this is like with the Bitcoin dollar system. This has been a narrative for as long as stablecoins have been kicking around. Is like, this is a way for the U.S. to maintain its dominance because we finally found someone who wants to buy our dollars. We're just dumping dollars on the rest of the world.
Yeah,
because we like Bitcoin. We don't like holding dollars. But everyone in the world, like the larger world, is looking just for something better than their local currency, and the dollar is king in that sense.
Always.
And it's a very compelling model for us. We can export our dollars, find a place for people to buy it, kind of. And the whole mechanic is, since someone is holding that dollar, if it's backed by something, right? Just to break it down for those at home, that stable coin is, the dollar is not just sitting in a checking account, it's sitting within short and long-term government treasuries and corporate debt and whatever have you, and that pays interest. And that interest is being paid to whoever's holding that treasury bill, not you as the end token holder. I think this is an interesting, just aside, I think Nick Carter and the Castle Island guys invested in a company called Mountain Protocol, and it's a stable coin, but if you hold the token, you get the yield. Right, they're trying to like flip that model a bit. Yeah.
So
I don't know it closely, but I know that they're working on something.
Hold on, so they're tokenizing treasuries.
They're tokenizing the dollars, but then your share of the dollar that ties to the treasury, you get a percentage of that yield passed through to you.
So it's kind of like an interest account.
It almost, it's a perfect. If like give me $1 million of this stable coin or $1 million of this interest bearing stable coin, and you're just going to hang out with it for a while. It's like a money market account. You just park, you would just park your money there while you're waiting to execute your next trade or do whatever you want. I think on a peer-to-peer system, people are less likely to use it. Maybe it's more akin to a savings account, and then like your traditional stable coin being like a checking account. I think that's an interesting evolution of the ecosystem. But to bring it back to the whole point here, someone is accruing those dollars, and those dollar stable coins are, as you can see through this chain, funding the U.S. government's operation. So if you're a critic of the U.S. government and what they do, you're going to be like, well, more stable coins means more U.S. Projection of hegemony and strength, and you want to kind of mitigate that, right? So it's all based on your own personal value structure and system. Are these good or bad things? And I think to your point about like, everyone wants to, like, they're 100% right, they're 100% wrong. I think I like what Mark and Whitney do is they kind of just bring receipts of things. And I think they respect their audience enough for that everyone can walk through and make their own decision, right? They're not going to make must be the way that things are. They're just saying like, hey, we have these series of facts. Make your own judgment what you will. Yeah, it's a fascinating idea. That, it's almost like the poacher turned gamekeeper kind of situation. It's like the tables are turned. We were often worried about one of the existential threats to Bitcoin was government, especially like Elizabeth Warren and her fucking idiots. But now it's like to get to a place where the US government would need Bitcoin because they need crypto and they need stable coins, and that maintains the dollar hegemony. It's just such a weird flip of the whole thing. Well, think about the game theory of this, right? Is that they're not going to be able to ban and prevent Bitcoin from existing, so it's going to go somewhere else. So is it better for them to keep the gates open and let people use it? Or are they going to push all of that innovation overseas? Right? Are they going to push everything, like kind of like the whole economic prosperity that Bitcoin brings to somewhere else? Like you can just keep it here and just tax it. That's a much more sensible structure of things. And then with the Bitcoin dollar system, you can kind of leverage that and kind of scratch your own back in the process.
Well, it's how much of the freedom of Bitcoin they allow as well. Because if they close off all the freedom aspects of Bitcoin, then they destroy Bitcoin, and then it really, I don't know. It's to me, it's no longer the paradigm shift, game-changing currency it is. It's just an asset.
Yeah, I agree with this. So when it comes to kind of structurally how Bitcoin works, I view it as I got into Bitcoin in 2013, 2014, because I was a Ron Paul libertarian and the Fed guy. I didn't like the US government printing money. And at $250 a coin back then, it seemed like a good asymmetric bet. I was a poor kid just out of college, but like I was following the trend line. I was like, this is going to go places. If Bitcoin wins, Bitcoin's at $1 million, but you can't transact it anymore. It has to be locked down. That's not a win for me, right? Like I don't view that as a social, like structural win for like what I view Bitcoin being able to empower individuals to control and own their own assets.
Well, and it's also more like a pyramid scheme at that point. Because if it has no usage beyond holding it and hoping more people hold it and continue to hold it, then what use has it? Like the great thing about Bitcoin is that it has usage.
Yeah.
That you can be sovereign. That if I want to give you some money now, Rob, I can give you and fuck anyone else who wants to try and stop me.
Yeah.
Like that is the strength of it.
Yeah.
And you so weirdly, it's almost like the US government needs it, annoyingly need it.
Yeah.
But they have to, obviously they don't want us to have any freedoms, or you as Americans, but they're going to have to allow some freedom. This is why Trump's so interesting.
Trump's an interesting segue because he was very anti-Bitcoin when he was first talking about it. But his policies were inherently very exactly, aren't we all? His policies were inherently very neutral, pro-Bitcoin, especially when you compare it to the Biden administration. You can go down the list of basically their restrictions and kind of cracking down. The biggest one that was the weird, like specifically Biden had the agency to stop, was this thing called Staff Accounting Bulletin 121, which without getting too deep in the mechanics, it would allow an easy way. It was an SEC bulletin advisory, which then became like their own rule that would make it really easy for banks to custody Bitcoin and crypto. And the Congress actually did something. They actually wrote a bill to abolish that so banks can then legally custody Bitcoin in a capital conducive way. And Biden vetoed it. And it's an open question of like, why would you do that? And there's theories on like, it's more of the Warren progressive wing of the party. They're skeptical of banks getting more control of things. But ultimately, I view that as that's part of the hyper-Bitcoinization story, is that BNY Mellon and JP Morgan Chase, they're all going to have Bitcoin, and you're going to be able to access it directly within your own bank account. And I think Trump has also found really interesting cultural tides of just seeing the Biden administration kind of cracking down on this industry as well as AI, and a lot of tech entrepreneurs and a lot of wealthy crypto people. I'm not sure if you saw, crypto by vertical has donated the most money to political campaigns, more than medical, like pharmaceuticals. Like crypto has beaten
more than
everyone.
big oil?
Oil, everyone.
Are we big crypto?
We are. We're part of big crypto.
Big crypto.
Yeah. So like it's becoming its own power coalition. This is part of the story, is enough wealth has been amassed now that we're not just going to be asking. We're going to be making demands and
we're going to be
lobbying politicians. It's the pay to play game of politics. Like I am not rich enough to participate in that game. I am merely a spectator, but it makes sense where a lot of people have a lot of wealth and opportunity that's tied into this industry. I mean, I joke with my family being like, oh, if Biden wins another term, maybe I'll just get thrown in prison. Like maybe what I'm just doing is going to be found out to be totally illegal and they're just going to throw me in prison, which is extreme, but I'm being glib in the sense.
No, but it's not that extreme.
I was about to come around and say, like, I say it like tongue in cheek, but it's also like sincere. Like the ultimate root of it here is sincere, that there's a lot of people, if they had their way, would outlaw Bitcoin. They would outlaw what I'm doing. They would just totally shut it down. Yeah. And I view that as this is where in Bitcoin circles, I sometimes butt heads, because I would consider myself I'm very proud of the American story in the narratives of what it's supposed to represent, like freedom and the encryption wars from the 90s. Like we have the right to know information. You can't make math illegal. And the idea that you're going to try and make math illegal now is just obscene. And I view kind of like in the traditions of freedom that Bitcoin is part of the American story explicitly. And I think this is like and rather than the cynical, we're just paying off politicians, is America and Bitcoin are ascendant, and like the narratives of Bitcoin are ascendant in how they are so tightly linked to what it is to have American ethos. Freedom to transact, freedom to property, freedom from search and seizure, right? These are all, right, freedom for you not to confiscate my wealth. These are all things that, and it necessarily had to happen outside of the US government because they're never going to do anything competently, that there's a way that's been figured out how to do that effectively now.
Well, look, I mean, maybe I see it differently as an outsider, but as a kid, God, I've talked about this pod so many times, but as a kid, I always like looked at America as this unbelievable place I wanted to go to. And my parents we weren't the family who could afford a trip to Florida, so we never went. Yeah. I first went when I was 24. The day after I found out my ex-wife was pregnant with Connor, actually, and got on a plane, went to New York, had the best time, and I've been coming back ever since. I've been here maybe 100 times. I mean, how many times have we hung out in America? I'm here all the time. I love it. Yeah. But America's drifted so far from what I romanticize about it, what I would see about it. Like, it's the kind of two hands that have grabbed around the neck of freedom and squeeze it. For me, it's fucking weird. But we're seeing this kind of resurgence of freedom. This like resurgence of the language around freedom. Yeah. This kind of rejection of this, whether it's a deep, I don't want to sound like a weirdo, but like deep state, censorship, big tech surveillance state. Yeah. And I like it. Because, I mean, Tudor Misa gave me this book to read last time when I was in Austin. It's about the Alamo and the fight for the Alamo. Yeah. And there was this moment in it where these group of Texans, they've got an old cannon, and they said, and the Mexicans wanted to get it from them because that was a risk, them having the cannon. They're like, "Come fucking take it." I don't know if they said fucking. They said, "Come and take it." Yeah. And as I'm reading it, and I was thinking, why did Tudor want me to read this book? And I understand it now because it's kind of a Bitcoin book. Like it's just, and for me, it's like, this is what America's about. It's a bit like, did you see the video of Dana White the other day saying, "I'm an American and this is America, and we value free speech." And
his RNC speech?
No, it was the one where it was an interview and somebody said and he talked about a sponsor had got in touch because he said he was pro-Trump, and they're like, they were a bit like, you need to not be doing that. It's like, who the fuck are you to tell me who to vote for? Yeah, this is America.
Right.
And I just think this is America thing has been lost. And it's definitely making a comeback.
I think it's coming back.
It's coming back. I think Trump has been part of that. But there is also a group of people who are very concerned about Trump as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important time to ask the question, like, for all the people who are very pro-Trump, just where could it go wrong?
Go wrong with Trump?
Yeah, where could it go wrong? It's important to ask those questions.
Yeah.
Because it's all well and good being pro-Trump. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's clearly he's clearly a gangster. They just got to fucking kill him. And he got up and was like,
it's wild.
But like, where could it go wrong? I think it's important to ask those questions.
Yeah. So, I mean, from someone who I would say keeps a reasonable like attention to politics, Trump has had like two very core beliefs that from like since the 80s, like when he got interviewed on Oprah Winfrey, right? Like all the way back then. It's tariffs and immigration. Those are like cornerstone, like I sincerely believe Trump holds those positions because he truly believes them, because he has decades of showing that. Everything else, I think he's a lot more amorphous and pragmatic as a strategist. Yeah. I think a lot of the I would say a lot of the 90s and 2010s Republican era, they were coming from like a very strong religious social conservatism movement, right? And, recently Trump did an interview talking about things like abortion. He was like, they really strongly believe what they think, but also you got to win elections, right? He's a pragmatist, right? He's playing a game of politics where he understands that he has many coalitions. I think the GOP generally is a big tent party. There's a lot of different coalitions. And he's much more of a pragmatist, where I think he's much more susceptible to go to swaying the wind. That's why he hated Bitcoin in 2016, 2017. And now today he's like doing large, donor drives and being actively engaged. And he's speaking at the Bitcoin conference. If you asked me like in 2016, if Trump was going to speak at a Bitcoin conference, I would have been like, no way. Right. I think it's just a maturation of his own platform, his advisors around him, as well as kind of Bitcoin kind of being ascendant, if it all kind of changed in this way. Where could it go wrong? I mean, there's nothing stopping him from flipping on a dime and then just all of a sudden deciding that all you need is like one bad event that could be somehow tied to crypto or Bitcoin, and then it could flip on a national security narrative instantly. For sure. Like that's not even like a far-stretched imagination in my mind. I would look at it and say, locks and, guns can be done for bad things, but we have a strong culture of the Second Amendment in this country, and we don't confiscate guns when bad things happen. Could things go south? For sure. I would say between the choice of who we have at the moment, as of yesterday afternoon now, Kamala Harris or Trump. Oh, it's cut and dry. Yeah. Very clear as to who's kind of like staked out the territory to be aligned with us. And I think that's kind of like out of the choice of the U.S. election, that's your choice. Like that's who you would go with. But a lot of things can always go wrong. I wouldn't expect a politician to like be perfectly faithful always. And I think that's, you have to make your trade and your decisions in the moment based on the choices in front of you.
And then where can it go? Well, you look at the flip side. I mean, someone tried to kill him.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was either a strange little loner who somehow got a ladder, got on a roof, undetected, unchecked, and managed to get 3-4 shots off, or someone tried to kill him. Someone tried to arrange a killing. Mm-hmm. But either way, I expect he's highly suspicious of who tried to kill him.
Oh, I'm very skeptical of. I was watching the congressional testimony. The director of Secret Service spoke today.
Oh, did she quit?
No, she didn't quit. She not only did she not quit, she didn't really answer any question whatsoever. It was a whole just kind of punting. And she said it would take 60 days to get a full report out. And like referred to like, oh, you have to ask the FBI about this or that. And I think
how much shit are they gonna
it's
hide?
Institutional rot though. Like I view the Secret Service and their obvious incompetency in that whole situation as this is just the inertia. You can call it deep state, whatever. But like government programs only get budget increases. They just get bigger and bigger. There's no forcing function for them to kind of self-reflect. Like you run a business, right? You sometimes, I imagine, have to make tough decisions and kind of cut and restructure and repivot and do things.
Because you have to be profitable.
Because you have to be profitable and you're fighting in the market. You don't have the luxury of just having an auto... Every year, like on April 15th, all the money comes flying in and you get paid to be able to do the next thing. Or you can just print more money and do the next thing, right? Like when you have that lack of an accountability feedback loop, which is the market, you're going to inevitably have stagnation, incompetency that just emerges.
The thing you hope is that if it is Trump, which it probably will be, we'll see. I mean, look, there's Obama came out pretty clear and said,
Open convention.
Yes,
he did.
I think somebody questioned why isn't it a Tulsi and RFK? I think if it was Tulsi and RFK, that would be a problem for Trump.
I think Tulsi, RFK, or Bernie. I think Bernie's old at this point, but there's a lot of people who were Bernie, who went over to Trump.
But I think RFK's got the momentum now. Put RFK and Tulsi out there. That's a problem for Trump. That's competition.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's a lock-in, especially now that Joe's pulled out.
Yeah.
Now, it was going to be a smooth sailing with Joe pulling out because Joe can't walk in a straight line without moving his arms normally or speaking full sentences. So that was already like, it's bad. That was already. So now I think there's going to be a lot of chaos between now and the DNC. There may very well be a play for an open convention.
Well,
we'll see.
But the hopeful position is, look, I'm not going to go down whether the accusations are right or wrong. He feels like he's been attacked and persecuted and had
I'd agree with that.
False cases against him. Look, I don't know the detail of everything.
Sure, we won't make this a Trump podcast.
I'm pretty sure, he's done some shady shit at one point or another. Look, I don't think he has a completely clean history. But either way, it's what he feels. Mm-hmm. And if he feels like it is a swamp now, and if he feels like there is a deep state and they are trying to kill him, and he suddenly realizes, like, hold on, like if he's a really true patriotic American, he feels like he needs to bring some freedom back. Well, Bitcoin is an answer to part of that.
Yeah, I would say Bitcoin's a big part of that. One of my critiques of Trump is that he was there. He already won the presidency and he didn't do any cleaning out of the deep state or swamp. He really didn't. But I agree with you. Bitcoin is part of this exit. It's a check on the system. That's how I view a successful Bitcoin integration with traditional finance is. It's a check on the system. No bailouts. You can do your funny games and you're printing money over here, and all that's going to do is accrue value to Bitcoin, right? That's what we all say, like money printer go burr. It's a bet on, it's a hedge and a bet against the government running competently. I think it's even like in safety, like if the government just started, going to a gold standard and paid all their bills and didn't run deficit spending, like Bitcoin would lose a lot of its reason for existing.
Yeah, like I interviewed him 5-6 years ago and I asked him what's the biggest threat to Bitcoin. He said competent government.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But we know that's not happening. But as long as Bitcoin can continue to exist as a system, you can do whatever funny games you want over there, and the value is going to accrue to me as a holder of Bitcoin. And that's ultimately like the greatest hedge bet of Bitcoin is like, there's a lot of chaos and uncertainty. I do know for a fact there will be taxes and there will be printing of money and they will not be paying back of debt. I just full confidence because no one in either party is able to do that. The last time someone tried doing that was Paul Ryan in 2012 as the VP candidate and Speaker of the House, and he got shellacked.
Well, mathematically,
no one wants
they
that.
can't.
No, they can't. Yeah, even if they wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Like you just can't.
The UK government tried at one point. They ran an austerity program. It was particularly punitive against the poorest in society, but they tried it. It was massively politically unpopular.
Didn't you also have that with like Liz Truss for like 45 days?
Yeah, look, I'm not a fan of Liz Truss, but she wanted to stimulate the economy. She wanted to drive growth and she wanted to cut taxes to do it. They were quite conservative policies, but I think they just felt a little bit just kind of shooting from the hip.
Yeah.
And I don't know the mechanics, but the guilt market shit itself.
Yeah.
And so, no one was having it.
Yeah.
We need the money printer.
It's a hard drug to get off. I've never had a money printer before, but I can imagine that's probably the toughest addiction to break.
Mate, if you
just make your own money.
Yeah, like you've got like your Hewlett Packard money printer and only you've got one. You just go in there at any point and print some money off.
Yeah.
Like you're going to keep printing.
Yeah.
It will be a drug. You will buy all the shit you want and then you'll buy more shit.
Yeah.
Of course you would.
That's traditional finance too, because that's the whole cancel-on effect is that the government does that and it bleeds into the financial system.
Yeah.
They restructure laws and rules. Bailouts happen. A business, if you're not getting a bailout if you mismanage your business, right? So like it's a whole different like perverse incentive in just how the economy is structured. And as long as Bitcoin can keep on chugging along, it's a hedge against all of that. Every dollar printed is a dollar accrued to Bitcoin in that whole system.
I do wonder where we go culturally with this though, because I feel like there's been a cultural shift over, and I see it more in America than I do in the UK. I'll be honest, a lot more. But there's been a bit of a cultural shift to be a little bit more argumentative, a little bit more dunking on people, and that's happening all the way up to presidential debates. Sure. I think there's a little bit less civility about. And I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing, but I just wonder where culturally that goes with Bitcoin. Because I think at heart, Bitcoin is a really good people. And I know I'm like generalizing a whole group, but they are. I think they're some of the kindest, most generous people I've met. Like most Bitcoiners I know, when they've made a bunch of Bitcoin, they just start giving it away, want to help others. So I do wonder culturally where this will take us, because I think we're at a time where we've got massive polarization in politics. I don't think we have big polarization in Bitcoin. There are disagreements, but...
You don't think there's polarization in Bitcoin?
I think there's polarization on individual topics, but you can also agree on certain topics. Whereas it's like that time when I interviewed Ted Cruz. I was like, I've got a question for you. Name me one thing you like that the Democrats do. And he's couldn't come up with one thing. Couldn't think of one thing, And I think he didn't want to admit anything. I think he could come up with something. I just didn't think he wanted to. And so you get these divides where like there's an issue. Okay, it's Ukraine, right? The right are anti-funding Ukraine. The left are like, we must fund Ukraine. Trans, abortion, whatever. It's just like, someone's opinion, which side of the crowd are on. In Bitcoin, you and I might disagree on ordinals. We might have a complete disagreement on that, but we might completely agree on, I don't know, give me another subject.
Proof of work.
Yeah, or not, or no like inflation for fees or whatever.
Sure.
Like, and also we'd disagree, but we'll stay friends.
So that's the kind of polarization. You mean kind of like
we're separate. We're separate people. We're just separated.
Interesting. I think there's a little fractal of that kind of polarization for a lot of people. Like you may mention ordinals. I think they kind of live in their own subculture and community that doesn't have as much crossover to like what you and I would call like Bitcoin culture. I don't think it's as bad because this is the funny thing that Bitcoin is for enemies, right? So one thing we all agree on is like, we're all stuck in this network together and you can't make me move my money or sell my coins. So we're all stuck together. And I think as a set of rules, like as a way that you can structure relationships, like in the politics of it all, we all agree on the Bitcoin network existing. And that's when we know that there's no really bullying you out. Pete, I can say I could yell at you. I can try and bully you, intimidate you. I can't make you sell your coins. You're still going to have those UTXOs.
Yeah.
Right. And it almost like de-escalates it because it removes like what's on the playing field to be like taking from the other person. The fact, like the property rights and the security of the Bitcoin network are like this like ultimate wall where like you can disagree, but like we're all going to be using this network together. So we all have to kind of figure out how we're going to move forward because it's the only way through it.
Yeah, and I think it would be important that we have a culture of traditional Bitcoin values of people running a node, like ensuring we don't only have white market Bitcoin, which is all ETF based.
Yeah,
the things we spoke about earlier. Because if we don't, it will become captured and it will lose. It'll lose its soul.
Yeah, I think if you were to call like Bitcoin culture, like the thing just realistically is most people in Bitcoin don't do that stuff. Like an honest like self-reflection here is that like most people aren't running nodes, or if they use a wallet, they're using some software that's not talking to their own node. So they're trusting someone else's software because I think so far it's worked out okay.
Yes, worked out fine.
But you need to have like almost centuries that are watching the watchmen that are running nodes and doing that stuff. And I think that's an important part of the culture. You want to make it accessible so anyone can do it, right? That's what Bitcoin ultimately, not only no bailouts, it's just optionality. You can go do all the other things you want, but if you want to, you can go into the bunker and get your coins running your own node and know that the money's yours. And that's almost like a release valve for shenanigans. And you see this with like exchanges when they go and collapse, right? Like when FTX went down, all the money started flowing out of there. And that's because and eventually they were short Bitcoin. So some people got stuck inside FTX, but that functions as a natural market release valve and there's no bailout for FTX. That's the way it's supposed to work. If you compare that to the 2008 financial crisis where Republicans and Democrats were unified for the most part in passing all of that stuff.
Of course.
Yeah, right. It was and that's what Mark and Whitney were talking about. Like it was across two administrations. It was right in 2008. So it was just as Bush was leaving office and Obama was entering. Yeah. Everyone was okay with making that trade and that play. There were a few people on the sidelines saying this was unprincipled, but just like you're going to hit the money printer every time, too big to fail, like globally systemic important like financial institutions, you're going to protect them.
Yeah. Well, look, it's wild times, man.
Yeah.
This
conference is going to be crazy. Nice to have you in Nashville. Like I was taking a reflection of just like this week is going to, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I can just tell that it's going to be a bunch of announcements, a bunch of crazy stories. It's going to be a wild week. And I'm almost like a inflection point on like the end of like what the old sense of Bitcoin culture and like what it is into what it's going to be as it's growing up. We're hitting puberty, Pete. Bitcoin's 15 years old. We're hitting puberty, that awkward growth stage. Our voice is going to start cracking a little bit. We're going to find our own way through the world, get pimples.
Do you think we're going to be saying, do you remember the times before the 24 conference when the world was one way? And after that conference, the world was another way.
I think in some capacity, I think it really like this is coming up to like be a big thing. It could totally just like flop out, fizzle out, nothing matters. Like it doesn't change anything. I think it does though. I'm feeling the energy. Maybe I'm just riding the hype. I think this year is a big moment just for the whole industry.
Yeah. I mean, look, the fact that they got Trump is fucking ridiculous. David Bailey, you're a joke, man.
Absolute legend.
How he does it every year and goes one further is beyond me. But no, I brought my kids. I was like, you need to be at this one.
Absolutely.
You need to come with me and see this craziness because it's going to be wild. I mean, I don't know how many the main conference room holds, but if 24,000 people are in there, 24,000 people are going to want to watch Trump.
Oh yeah.
They might as well cancel all the other stages while he's on stage. You don't want to be on a panel while Trump's on.
Mine is the last panel before. So like the 30 minutes before Trump is my panel on the open source stage. Gap? It's like 30 minutes between my talk and Trump's talk.
Dude, it's going to be like that one where you remember that old video of Andreas doing a presentation at a Bitcoin.
And there's like 6 people in a room.
Yeah, that's what you're going to be
facing. That's going to be my panel. It's me, Rindell, and Nick from Frost Snap. So we're just doing a tech panel on the open source stage, and we were laughing, being like, I'm just going to bring a bottle of bourbon because like no one's going to be watching. We're just going to hang out on stage.
I'm so intrigued to what he's going to say. I'm so intrigued. And whether he's just going to like, he's just going to pander to us or whether he's like, he's got it. Because like Cruz gets it. Mm-hmm. Ted Cruz fully gets it.
Oh yeah.
You don't have to be a fan of Ted Cruz. You can hate Ted Cruz.
Bitcoin's a Texas business. Dude, he's been a good politician.
Bro, he gets it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've interviewed him and he understands it. It's whether Trump has got to that point where it's like, because like, I mean, I've got no idea what the conversations with David Bailey's had with him or their team, but there's very good reasons for them to adopt Bitcoin as part of their treasury. There are.
Absolutely.
There's very good reasons for them to have a pro-Bitcoin strategy. Look, if Bitcoin's not going away, you want as much Bitcoin in America as possible. You want to make you want to carry that wealth in the US.
So that was I think the narrative judo that got Trump on board when he heard that like China would mine the Bitcoins instead. He was like, we're going to mine those Bitcoin in America. Like those are American Bitcoin, right? The moment you put in that geopolitical lens and like international relations, Trump is like, I don't like Bitcoin. Wait, China's going to take the Bitcoin? No, I want the Bitcoin, right? And just like go in there. And very smart positioning in that sense. It's also true. I would rather, if you're telling me a world where like China has a bunch of Bitcoin or the US has a bunch of Bitcoin, I'm a proud American citizen. I want America to have the Bitcoin. Right?
I mean, China's going to look back at one point and think, we gone fucked up there. We fucked up.
Yeah, the mining ban and everything and cracking everything down.
Yeah, but the rumors are that people are saying, those people.
Many people tell me.
Yeah. Many people. I don't want to do accents. I'm terrible at accents. But China's softening its stance on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Is that true? Have you heard that?
I've heard that. I was in Hong Kong. I was at the Bitcoin Magazine conference, Bitcoin Asia in Hong Kong, and that's a lot of the vibes and the energy there. It's loosening up.
Because they don't want America to have all the Bitcoin. It's the game theory's playing out, man.
This is, yeah.
Well, listen, AnchorWatch.
Yeah.
People go check it out.
Check me out.
60 days?
60, 90 days.
60,
Fingers
90
crossed,
days.
trying to get across the finish line. If you want to email me, if you have any questions, rob@anchorwatch.com. Go to our website, anchorwatch.com. And looking forward to this week in the conference.
Bro, kill it. Love you. See you later, everybody.
Thanks. Take care.